Woman's glove in family portrait reveals disturbing truth about American slavery. Historical investigation. The Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in Harlem receives donations of African American historical materials almost daily. Photographs, letters, documents that families have preserved for generations, hoping to contribute to the collective memory of Black American history. But on a crisp October morning in 2024, archivist Dr. Angela Freeman opens a package that will lead to one of the most significant discoveries about post-emancipation violence in recent years. The donation comes from an estate in Atlanta, Georgia. The letter explains that the items belong to Mrs. Claudia Washington, who passed away at 96. Her granddaughter, clearing out the family home, discovered a trunk of photographs and documents dating back to the 1880s. She thought the Schomburg Center might want them for their collection. Angela carefully removes a large albumen print from its protective wrapping. The photograph is in excellent condition, mounted on heavy cardboard with a photographer's embossed mark, Thomas & Sons Photography, Atlanta, Georgia, 1889. The image shows a formal family portrait, taken in what appears to be a well-appointed photographer's studio. Ornate curtains frame the background, and the sepia tones give the image a warm, dignified quality. 6 people are arranged in a careful composition, 3 adults in the back row, 3 children in the front. At the center sits a black woman in her 40s, seated in an elaborately carved wooden chair. She wears a dark Victorian dress with long sleeves, a high collar, and a decorative brooch at her neckline. Her expression is serious and proud, her posture upright and commanding. Her hands rest in her lap, and she wears long, dark gloves that extend past her wrists. Standing behind her are 2 black men in formal dark suits with bow ties. The man on the left appears to be in his late 20s, his expression confident and direct. The man on the right looks younger, perhaps 20, with a more guarded expression. Seated in front are 2 young black girls in white dresses with lace collars, their hair neatly styled, their hands folded primly in their laps. One appears to be about 10 years old, the other perhaps 12. And standing on the left in the front row is a black boy, perhaps 13, wearing a dark suit similar to the adult men. This is clearly a prosperous black family, probably taken during the brief period after Reconstruction, when some black families achieved economic success before the full implementation of Jim Crow laws crushed most opportunities. The formal clothing, the professional studio setting, the dignified poses, all speak of a family determined to document their achievement and respectability. Angela has catalogued hundreds of such photographs. They're precious documents of black life, black families, black dignity in a period when such images were rare and powerful, counter-narratives to racist stereotypes. But something about this particular photograph makes Angela pause and look more closely. She pulls out her magnifying glass and examines the image under her desk lamp. The woman's gloves. There's something odd about them. The left glove fits normally, but the right glove appears bulky at the wrist, as if something is underneath it. And when Angela looks very closely at the woman's right hand, she can see the outline of something beneath the glove, creating a distinctive rectangular bulge. Angela scans the photograph at ultra-high resolution and opens it on her computer. She zooms in on the woman's right hand and enhances the image. The bulge becomes clearer. There's definitely something under that glove, something rectangular, perhaps 2 inches wide and several inches long. She also notices something else. The woman's right wrist, where the glove ends, and a small strip of skin is visible between glove and sleeve, shows what appears to be scarring, raised tissue, discoloration that's visible even through the photograph's sepia tones. Angela turns the photograph over. The back has an inscription in faded ink. Washington family, October 1889. Mother Clara, sons Benjamin and Thomas, daughters Sarah and Elizabeth, and nephew James. May we always remember. And below that, in different handwriting, added much later, Mama kept the brand hidden all her life. Only family knew. Look at her glove. Angela reads the note 3 times. A brand. Someone had branded Clara Washington, marking her flesh like livestock, and she kept it hidden under gloves for the rest of her life. And in this formal family portrait, she was hiding something under that glove. Evidence, perhaps, documentation of what had been done to her. Angela spends the rest of the day searching for information about Clara Washington and her family. She finds census records showing the Washington family in Atlanta in 1890. Clara Washington is listed as a widow, head of household, occupation, laundress. Her sons, Benjamin and Thomas, are listed as laborers, the daughters as students. But when Angela searches backward through earlier records, she finds Clara listed in the 1870 census as Clara Morris, enslaved person, freed by the 13th Amendment, residing in Macon, Georgia. No parents listed, no age given, just Clara, female, age approximately 25. The 1860 slave schedule for Macon County shows a plantation owner named Richard Morris, who owned 43 enslaved people. One is listed only as female, age approximately 16. That was almost certainly Clara. Angela needs to find out more about what happened to Clara during slavery, why she was branded, and what she was hiding under her glove in that photograph. She contacts Dr. Raymond Williams, a historian at Emory University who specializes in slavery in Georgia and has spent decades researching the experiences of enslaved women. Raymond calls her back within hours. Send me everything. High-resolution images, the inscription, all of it. If Clara Washington was branded and hiding evidence under her glove, this could be an extraordinary find. Angela emails the files, and they arrange to meet at the Georgia Historical Society in Savannah, where Raymond has already requested records related to the Morris Plantation and post-emancipation black families in Georgia. That evening, Angela can't stop thinking about the photograph. She zooms in on Clara Washington's face, studying her expression, the dignity, the pride, but also something in her eyes, a kind of fierce determination, as if she's daring the world to challenge her right to sit in that ornate chair, to have her portrait made with her family, to claim respectability despite what had been done to her. And those gloves. Clara had hidden her brand for decades, but in this photograph, she had deliberately placed something under the glove, creating a visible bulge that would show in the image. Why? What was she hiding there? And what did she want future generations to see? Angela meets Raymond at the Georgia Historical Society 3 days later. The archivist has pulled boxes of documents related to the Morris Plantation, ledgers, correspondence, legal records, and tragically bills of sale for enslaved people. They divide the work. Raymond takes the plantation records while Angela searches through post-war documents and black newspapers from Atlanta in the 1880s and 1890s. Within an hour, Raymond finds references to Clara in the plantation ledgers. In an entry from 1859, when Clara would have been about 15 years old, the ledger notes, "Girl Clara, age 15, assigned to house service, disciplined for attempted escape, branded as per customary punishment." Raymond sits back, his expression grim. They branded her for trying to escape. She was 15 years old. Angela feels sick. Branding enslaved people was not uncommon. It was a way to permanently mark runaways, to make it harder for them to pass as free, to punish and humiliate them. But knowing it happened to Clara, seeing it documented so casually in a ledger as customary punishment, makes the horror immediate and personal. They search for more information about Clara's life on the Morris plantation and find disturbing details in letters between Richard Morris and his overseer. In a letter from 1860, the overseer writes, "The girl, Clara, remains rebellious despite the brand. She has been caught teaching other slaves to read, which I have punished severely. I recommend she be sold south, as she is a constant source of disruption." But Clara wasn't sold. Angela finds her listed in Morris plantation records throughout the Civil War period, always with notes about her being difficult to manage and requiring constant supervision. After emancipation in 1865, Clara appears in Freedmen's Bureau records. She had remained in Macon for several years, working as a laundress and seamstress before moving to Atlanta in the mid-1870s. By 1880, she had married a man named Moses Washington, also formerly enslaved, who worked as a carpenter. Angela searches through Atlanta newspapers and finds mentions of Clara Washington in the black press. She had been active in her church, involved in efforts to establish schools for black children, and known in the community as a woman of strong character and determination. But it's in a black newspaper from 1890 that Angela finds the most important information. The Atlanta Independent published an article about a meeting of formerly enslaved women who gathered to discuss their experiences and advocate for justice. Mrs. Clara Washington spoke with great emotion about the violence inflicted upon enslaved women, including the practice of branding women and girls as punishment. Mrs. Washington revealed for the first time publicly that she herself was branded at age 15 after attempting to escape slavery. She displayed the brand, the initials RM for Richard Morris, burned into her wrist, and stated that she keeps documentation of this crime pressed against the brand at all times as a reminder of what was done to her and as evidence should she ever have the opportunity to seek justice. Mrs. Washington's testimony moved many in attendance to tears, and her courage in speaking publicly about such a painful experience was widely praised. Angela reads the passage 3 times, her heart pounding. Clara kept documentation pressed against her brand at all times. In the 1889 photograph, she had something under her glove, pressed against the scarred flesh on her wrist. She was hiding evidence, Angela says to Raymond, something written, documented, proof of what was done to her. Raymond searches through legal records and finds what they're looking for. In 1891, 2 years after the photograph, Clara Washington filed a civil lawsuit against the estate of Richard Morris, who had died in 1890. She claimed damages for the branding and abuse she suffered while enslaved, seeking financial compensation for the permanent disfigurement and psychological trauma. The case was dismissed almost immediately. The Georgia court ruled that Clara had no legal standing to sue for damages from events that occurred during slavery, when she was property rather than a person with legal rights. The judgment stated that unfortunate practices that occurred under the institution of slavery cannot be remedied through civil litigation after emancipation, as they were legal at the time they occurred. But attached to the case file is a document Clara submitted as evidence, a sworn affidavit she had written in 1889, detailing the branding and other abuses she suffered, describing the permanent scarring, and demanding acknowledgement of the crime committed against her. The affidavit is dated October 1889 The same month, the family photograph was taken. She wrote the affidavit and then had the photograph made, Raymond says with certainty. She kept the affidavit under her glove during the portrait session, pressed against the brand, documenting that she carried this evidence with her always. Angela searches for more information about Clara's life after the failed lawsuit and finds that she continued to be active in advocating for formerly enslaved people. In 1895, she testified before a church commission investigating the ongoing effects of slavery on black families. Her testimony includes this passage: "I carry the mark of slavery on my body every day. The brand burned into my wrist when I was 15 years old for the crime of seeking freedom. I have kept documentation of this crime pressed against that brand for years, hoping someday justice would be possible. When justice was denied by the courts, I understood that the law still protects those who committed these crimes and denies recognition to their victims. But I will not stop demanding that truth be told, and that what was done to me and millions like me be acknowledged as the crimes they were." Angela and Raymond need to find out what happened to Clara Washington, and whether any of her descendants might still have the affidavit she wrote, the evidence she kept pressed against her brand for so many years. They work with genealogists to trace Clara's family line. Her son Benjamin had children who remained in Atlanta. Her daughter Sarah moved to Chicago and had a large family there. Raymond finds that one of Sarah's great-granddaughters, Dr. Michelle Carter, is a professor of African American studies at Northwestern University. Angela calls Dr. Carter, her voice shaking slightly. "Dr. Carter, my name is Dr. Angela Freeman from the Schomburg Center. I've been researching your great-great-great-grandmother Clara Washington, and I've discovered some remarkable documents about her experiences in slavery and her efforts to seek justice for the violence done to her." Michelle Carter's response is immediate and emotional. "Clara Washington. My grandmother told me stories about her. She said Clara was branded when she was young, that she kept the brand hidden under gloves her whole life, that she tried to sue the man who did it to her, but the courts wouldn't hear the case. We have some family documents, letters, a few photographs, but we never had much detail about her life or her lawsuit." "I have the court records," Angela says. "I have the affidavit Clara wrote describing what was done to her. And I have a photograph where Clara is hiding something under her glove. I believe it's that affidavit, documenting that she carried her testimony with her always." Michelle Carter flies to New York 2 days later. Angela and Raymond meet her at the Schomburg Center, and they spend the afternoon sharing everything they've discovered. Michelle examines each document with the careful attention of both a scholar and a descendant, learning painful truths about her ancestor. When she sees the photograph, her great-great-great-grandmother seated in that ornate chair, wearing gloves to hide the brand, the bulge visible where she's hiding the affidavit under the glove, Michelle has to pause and collect herself. "We always knew Clara was strong," she says quietly. "We knew she survived terrible things, that she fought for justice even when it was denied. But I never understood the full scope of what she did. To document what was done to her, to carry that testimony pressed against her brand, to have a formal portrait made with her family, showing that she carried this evidence always. That's extraordinary courage." Angela shows her Clara's affidavit from the court case, the full description of the branding and abuse, the demand for acknowledgement and justice that was denied. She shows her the newspaper articles about Clara's public testimony, her advocacy work, her refusal to be silenced about what had been done to her. "Clara didn't just survive," Raymond says. "She fought. She documented what was done to her. She testified publicly despite the shame and pain involved. She sued for justice, even though she knew she'd likely lose. She made sure the truth was recorded for future generations. Michelle nods, tears streaming down her face. My grandmother used to say that Clara taught our family to speak truth, no matter the cost, to document injustice even when no one wants to hear it, to demand justice even when it seems impossible. Now I understand what she meant. Angela then asks the question she's been building toward. Dr. Carter, I'd like to create an exhibition about Clara's story, about the violence inflicted on enslaved women, about the permanent marks that slavery left on bodies and minds, about the courage it took to seek justice in a system designed to deny it. Would you be comfortable with that? Michelle looks at her with fierce determination. Not just comfortable, insistent. Clara's story needs to be told. People need to understand that slavery didn't just end with emancipation. The scars remained. Physical scars like the brand on Clara's wrist, psychological scars, legal scars when the courts refused to acknowledge crimes committed during slavery. Clara demanded the truth be told and justice be served. The least we can do is honor that demand by telling her story fully and honestly. Over the next months, Angela, Raymond, and Michelle work together to create the exhibition. Michelle brings family documents that have been preserved for generations. Letters Clara wrote to her children, photographs, a small box containing the gloves Clara wore in the 1889 portrait. And most remarkably, Michelle brings the affidavit. Clara's family had kept it for 135 years, passing it down through generations as evidence of what had been done to their ancestor and of her courage in demanding justice. The affidavit, written in Clara's own hand in careful script, describes the branding in detail. In the summer of 1859, when I was 15 years old, I attempted to escape from the Morris plantation, where I was enslaved. I was caught within 2 days and returned to the plantation. As punishment, Mr. Richard Morris ordered that I be branded with his initials as a permanent mark of his ownership and as a warning to other enslaved people not to attempt escape. The branding was done with a hot iron in the presence of other enslaved people who were forced to watch as a lesson. The pain was beyond description. The healing took weeks, and the scar remains to this day. A permanent disfigurement that I must hide under gloves and long sleeves. This branding was a crime against my body and my humanity. That it was legal under slavery laws does not make it less a crime. I write this affidavit to document what was done to me, and to demand that such acts be recognized as the violence they were. I keep this document with me always, pressed against the brand, as a reminder and as evidence. Should justice ever become possible, I will be ready to testify. The affidavit is dated October 15th, 1889, exactly 1 week before the family photograph was taken. 9 months after Angela first opened that package, the Schomburg Center opens the exhibition What the Glove Was Hiding, Clara Washington's Quest for Justice. The exhibition occupies a major gallery, and lines form before the doors open on the first day. The centerpiece is the 1889 photograph, displayed with lighting that draws attention to Clara's gloved hands and the visible bulge where she's hiding the affidavit. A magnified detail view shows the scarring visible at her wrist, where the glove ends. Beside the photograph is Clara's handwritten affidavit, the actual document she kept pressed against her brand for years. The paper is worn at the edges from being carried, folded, and handled countless times. The exhibition tells Clara's complete story through documents, letters, and testimony. It explains how she was branded at 15 for attempting to escape, how she kept documentation of this crime with her always, how she testified publicly about what was done to her, and how she sued for justice, only to have the courts deny her claim. One section focuses on the practice of branding enslaved people, showing how it was used to mark runaways, to assert ownership, to inflict permanent physical and psychological damage. Historical documents describe the practice, but Clara's personal testimony makes it real and immediate. Another section examines the legal aftermath of emancipation, showing how courts refused to provide remedies for violence committed during slavery. Clara's case is presented alongside similar cases where formerly enslaved people sought compensation for abuse and were systematically denied. A video plays continuously featuring Dr. Michelle Carter and other descendants sharing family stories about Clara, explaining how her courage influenced their family's values, reflecting on what it means to carry the legacy of such extraordinary strength and determination. The exhibition also displays the gloves Clara wore in the photograph, preserved by her family for 135 years. Visitors can see the right glove and understand exactly how Clara hid the affidavit against her brand, how she insisted on carrying her testimony with her always, how she made sure this evidence would be visible in the family portrait for future generations to notice and investigate. On opening day, Angela stands in the gallery watching visitors engage with the exhibition. She sees people lean close to the photograph, studying Clara's face and her gloved hands. She sees them read the affidavit with growing horror and admiration. She sees parents explaining to children what branding meant, what it took to survive such violence and still fight for justice. Dr. Michelle Carter stands beside her, staring at her great-great-great-grandmother's image. Clara was 45 years old in this photograph, she says quietly. 30 years after being branded, she was still carrying documentation of what was done to her, still demanding justice, still refusing to be silent. She had this portrait made with her family, showing her dignity, her achievement, her respectability. But she also made sure her hidden testimony was visible, creating a bulge in that glove that would make people look closer and ask questions. A young black woman approaches them, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for this," she says. "I never knew that formerly enslaved people tried to sue for damages, that they documented what was done to them, that they demanded justice even when they knew they'd be denied. Seeing Clara's courage, it helps me understand resistance in a new way." An elderly white woman stops to look at the affidavit for a long time. "She wrote this herself," the woman says to Michelle, "in her own hand, describing what was done to her, demanding it be recognized as a crime. That's powerful testimony." "It is," Michelle agrees, "and it was testimony that the legal system refused to hear. But Clara made sure it would survive for future generations to read and acknowledge, even if her contemporaries wouldn't." Throughout the day, visitors engage deeply with the exhibition, spending time with each document, watching the videos multiple times, sitting with the weight of what they're learning. The photograph that seemed to show a dignified black family in the post-Reconstruction era reveals itself to be something more complex. Documentation of survival, hidden testimony about violence, evidence of one woman's determination to demand justice, even when justice was impossible. As the museum prepares to close that evening, Angela walks through the gallery one more time. She stops in front of the photograph, looking at Clara Washington's proud face, her upright posture, her gloved hands with that telling bulge where she's hiding her testimony. The photograph had waited 135 years to reveal its secret. It had passed through generations of Clara's family, who understood what that glove was hiding, but who couldn't make the wider world understand or care. Until now. Now the photograph has fulfilled a purpose Clara surely intended when she insisted on having that family portrait made with her testimony hidden under her glove. The truth has been revealed. The violence done to her has been documented and acknowledged. And Clara Washington's courage, her refusal to hide her truth, even when she had to literally hide her scarred body, has been honored. The affidavit folded under a woman's glove in a family portrait changed everything. It preserved testimony that courts refused to hear. It survived when Clara herself might have been silenced. It waited more than a century to be noticed and examined, and finally given the acknowledgement Clara demanded when she wrote it in 1889. As visitors file past the image one last time, seeing Clara clearly for who she was, not just a survivor, but a fighter. Not silenced, but speaking through hidden testimony, not ashamed but proud and determined to demand justice on her own terms. Angela thinks about all the other secrets hidden in photographs, all the other testimonies carried in bodies marked by violence, all the other truths that people like Clara found ways to preserve even when their voices were legally silenced. Clara Washington's story has been told. Her testimony, hidden under a glove for a formal portrait, but preserved by family for generations, has finally been heard and acknowledged. And Angela is grateful to have played a part in ensuring that Clara's courage, her documentation of injustice, and her demand for justice are remembered and honored across the generations.